Hi everybody, my name is Heather Siegel and I am the author of The King and the Quirky, a memoir of love, marriage, domesticity, feminism, and self, which came out last month and which I was scheduled to come and read from at the Boulder bookstore, as well as say hello to some friends who live in Boulder and to have a celebration for a book tour stop at your wonderful store. I'm still thrilled to be here to introduce you to the work from my home in New York and to answer some questions that Boulder Bookstore was kind enough to send my way so that I could say hello to you and introduce you to the work. So I think I'll just dive right into this self-interview and go from there. And I hope to also read a little from the book as well. So the first question coming from Boulder Bookstore is, what does feminism mean to you? Which is a great question, and I'm still contemplating the answer. But I would say that to distill it down, it means the freedom to make choices, that are right for me. I would also say feminism is inclusive and non-judgmental about others' choices and their own desires to make those choices, whether or not there's something I agree with. I guess a definition that I bring up in the book and something that I do plan on teaching my daughter is a branch of feminism called financial feminism, something I didn't know about when I would walk past the women's studies program in college thinking for some reason that feminism didn't apply to me. I think the reason I felt that is because I had been on my own since I was 14 and was a survivor and was making my own choices and doing what I wanted and eventually opening my own business. So it didn't really occur to me, and in that way I was a little spoiled, not necessarily knowing what everyone had gone through to give me the freedoms that I have now. But financial feminism, was probably a school of thought that I could have learned about earlier and saved myself some strife and heartache that happens in here. So I will be passing that along. Next question. During these past few months of isolation and COVID, have you been able to maintain a sense of self while being with your family 24/7? What books, shows, and activities have kept you sane? That's a great question. I guess like everyone else, I've been looking for my hiding spots. One hiding spot is this room here. Door closed, no one allowed in. I guess another hiding spot is my bathtub and maybe the closet. No, maybe not the closet. Lots of walks with the dog. I would say my dog's probably sick of it. Here's that leash and is like, not again. Trips to the grocery store. I can't get groceries delivered here for whatever reason, so I have to suit up and go, and I've actually begun to look forward to it. Do I sit in the parking lot sometimes with my Starbucks and ice packs that I brought for my groceries so that they could stay an extra 20 minutes? Maybe, but that's between us. I guess what I'm saying is keeping it light, humor. The sillier the better for me. I read Andy Borowitz, I read The Onion every day. I just discovered a new show on Netflix, I think it's Netflix, What We Do in the Shadows, which is done by the same people who did Flight of the Conchords. That's what I need. I need slapstick, I need the sillier the better. So that's my way of coping. Next question. At what point in your journey did you realize you needed to write a book about your experiences? Well, I don't know that I would even say that I needed to. I think that it all began with feelings and questions, as most writing does, especially memoir. But I think I was both annoyed and tickled by the differences that I had begun to see between my spouse and myself. And the annoyed part was probably about how much work it took to keep this marriage of opposites together. And I think also my ability to see story in everyday life. I began to see my husband as a character. I think I always have this ability to sort of float outside of something and hover above and see the situation and to have an objectivity with it. And I began to see him as a character, which again, it was both an annoyance and, amusement. But he had what I call Johnisms. And so I began to write these down and just certain phrasings that I felt that other people don't really use. Like if my daughter made a smoothie and, she liked it and she did a good job, I would say, oh, she's so proud of herself. She made, with her smoothie. And he'd say, oh, because of pride of authorship or the taste. I feel like pride of authorship. Okay. It described it, but I just really never heard somebody talk like that. And so I began to write those down. So I don't know that I knew I needed to write a book, but I knew that I needed to write these things down instinctually. Next question. How difficult was it to begin your journey to regain some shred of your old self when you had a child? Well, I think I'm still trying, but that in part has more to do with aging as it does negotiating motherhood. I don't think we can go back. I think what works for us then doesn't work for us now. The journey that I take in my ablutions chapter here helped tremendously. I think there's a huge connection between the mind and the body, and dealing with the body helped deal with my mind. So I don't even know that it had anything to do with having the child. I think that just sort of set the stage for more immersion in this world of marriage and domestic life, and more anchoring down. And because of that, it was just a little harder to come up to the surface. Next question. Did your adventures change your definition of what it means to be a mother? I don't know if my adventures described in the book changed my definition of what it means to be a mother. The book actually covers mostly early motherhood, and I think that requires like one facet of who we are to our children. In the book, motherhood, I think, is more a backdrop and a catalyst of change for me and for us as a couple. I think only now, outside of this book, having a teenager and, I have a more comprehensive ideal of what motherhood is. And I understand the many roles that I need to play. And having, that spectrum of experience in motherhood has changed me more than the events of early motherhood in the book. Okay, next question. Tell us a bit about the journey of writing this book. Did you just sit down and start writing from the beginning, or did you write it more episodically with the first story that came to your mind? Did you spend years working on this, or was this an intense several months of furious writing? That's a great question. I guess I would say from start to finish, it took me a few years. I wrote it in layers. As I mentioned, it started with the Johnisms and writing those down. And I think that once I had those, I had to think of, well, what are my reactions to these? I think memoir requires this reflection. So that turned into an essay. The essay was called He and I. And I never published it, but it really was modeled on Natalia Ginsburg's essay, He and I just did it for fun, for the joy of it, and it made me laugh. And so I, just really understood this marriage of opposites that I was in, and yet at the same time, I also understood that that's the situation, so what's the story? So Vivian Gornick has a book out, right? The Situation and the Story. And so I realized, okay, I've got my situation, what's my story? So that was layer one. And then I think layer two was thinking about the love narrative that we are taught in one way or another through movies and books and literature and fairy tales and whatnot, and passing this narrative down to our children and telling them about it, and answering the question of how do we go from this intense love to mild dissatisfaction And is there ever a way to get back? So that was a question. And then I guess layer 3 was, who was I in this story? I knew I wasn't a queen, but I did have a sort of I Love Lucy quality about me, where I would get myself into these situations and these crazy scenarios. And so I came up with the word quirky, one, because people had called me that throughout the years, and two, I'd like the Q to go with the king. So the king and the quirky. And I think that what I found the story to be is what I have here on the back cover, which is, I'll read to you. 34-year-old Heather Siegel is eccentric, artsy, and independent, and she doesn't believe in romantic fairy tales, at least not until she meets her opposite in John, a man of science, logic, and kingly ego. She not only falls for the idea of love and soulmates, she goes one step further. Going against the advice of 3 waves of feminism, she moves to the suburbs of Long Island and invests wholeheartedly in marriage and motherhood. Naturally, it doesn't take long before she finds herself lost and adrift. To regain a shred of her old self, she embarks upon a series of quirky and painfully humorous entrepreneurial and health adventures. Can you be a stay-at-home mother and still be a feminist? Does the word soulmate have more than one meaning? Should we believe in the true love narrative? What is the goal of marriage and raising children anyway? These are questions posed within this high drama of the mundane, in which, spoiler alert, no murder happens, no affair unfolds, and no death, illness, or trauma is suffered. What does unspool is an entertaining arc of transformation, a light introspective about a marriage of opposites, and boatloads of honesty. So I think that that encapsulates the story that I eventually figured out. That answers that question. What's the last one? Can you read us a short passage from your book? Yes. I thought I might pick from Courtship, which is chapter 3. And this is when I actually subscribe to the true love narrative. Would I have drunk the Kool-Aid right then and there? Damn straight. You know that montage scene in movies where the in-love couple walks hand in hand on the beach, shares a tub of popcorn at the movies, and downs a milkshake using 2 straws? That was us, substituting a soy spirulina shake for dairy and reducing the number of straws to 1. He was a good sport, but he wasn't a fan of spirulina's grainy texture. And this is from a pond? John asked. It's a high-protein algae with all the essential amino acids. So it's pond scum? I laughed. I'd never thought of it that way. Basically, yes. I think I'll enjoy watching you enjoy it. He sat back in my kitchen chair amused, but also truly enjoying watching me drink a protein shake. I began to believe in the narratives, in all the impassioned literature, and in my friends' initial stories. With each passing day, I believed in their magic and power and rethought my lampshade quote. Love was not something we made up to make more of our biological selves. It was, in part, biological. It was primal and basic and tangible and earthly and at the same time heady. Although it would be some time before I read about Helen Fisher's concept of the love drive and the addiction of love inside the brain, I could practically feel the dopamine spiking. We were like teenagers. For the next week and a half, we separated only to work, unable to imagine a life before meeting, and even then he visited me, occupying a corner armchair on his computer, keeping one eye on me as I rang up lattes and schmoozed with the tatted, pierced 20-something regulars who planned to change the world. Afterward, we would go next door to the Wantagh Inn, an Irish cop bar, and listen to a cover band, or to the corner diner where he would order his fries hot and extra, extra crispy, and then poach some of my cold, soggy ones. We drove to Long Beach, parked down a side street, and made our way past the single bars I used to frequent, the floors sticky with beer, the bathrooms smelling faintly of vomit, back in what felt like a lifetime ago. We climbed onto the icy boardwalk that stretched for miles to watch the wide expanse of the Atlantic Ocean crash and roll before us, to watch the world unfurled together. I could feel myself morphing, this 34-year-old person with her hard edges. She was softening, opening her eyes to new points of view, and wondering and hoping that she wasn't delusional about this inexplicable connection. We still hadn't consummated the deal, trying, as I think, we both had secretly decided to allow a respectable amount of time to pass. But at the end of the second week, as I was blow drying my hair getting ready to drive to his place for the first time, he made his intentions clear. "There's a snowstorm coming," he texted, "so pack an overnight bag." My stomach danced, even as I worried. What if the sex wasn't perfect? What if we only had 2 points of the triangle? Should I bring my footy pajamas? No pajamas, just a toothbrush. Nervous, in a good kind of way, I made my way north following Route 107, past the Walmart and Kmart shopping centers of Levittown and the delicious curry houses of Hicksville, and then through Bethpage, home to Grumman, whose toxic plume, already spreading and contaminating local water wells, had yet to be discovered. I could have been looking at the seascape of La Jolla, but I knew that no longer mattered. Meeting him had cast the dull landscape of Long Island in technicolor. The snow had started to fall in chunks, and I succumbed to the slow crawl of cars. John texted nonstop, admonishing me to drive carefully and to stop reading his texts. I shot back at a red light. "Then stop texting!" Meanwhile, I hoped he'd never stop texting, never stop caring. No one had doted over my every waking second like this, not in adulthood, and definitely not in childhood. Love, I decided right then and there, as much it was about how we felt about another, was equally about the way each other made us feel about ourselves. And so that's my passage that I'm reading from The King and the Quirky. I hope that you have enjoyed connecting with me today and learning a little bit about this book. I hope that you will support your local bookstore and purchase one, as well as other books. And I hope that everybody stays safe and healthy during this strange time. And I wish you all the best. Thanks for tuning in.